place you may never have heard of, let alone seen in the newspapers or on television. It's a province in Shia-dominated Iran, with a restive Sunni population. It's called Baluchistan. You will see graphic footage of militant strikes and brutal extrajudicial killings on two sides of a simmering conflict. You will meet a prominent local guerrilla commander who is gaining international renown. Some see him as a budding. He appeared calm as he bragged about his successful attacks on Iran's most elite troops.
ما حملات بسیار زیادی را انجام رسیدیم تا از نوع عملیات خرابکاری، از نوع عملیات چریکی، عملیات غافلگیرانه، متوجه جنگ و گریز، عملیات‌های رو در رو رژیم.
Over the last 2 years, Rigi says his movement has effectively struck the Iranian army thanks to the widespread support of the local Baluch population.
و تا هنوز بیش از 300-400 نفر، یعنی بیش از 400 نفر تگوش از مأموران رژیم از اول تا هنون کشته بودند. ولی ارتش ایران و نیروهای ایران بسیار ترسوند.
We obtained footage of a raid that Rigi and his group conducted and filmed last year. They drove across a desert by day, and as the sun fell, the men stopped to say their prayers. They are Muslim, but they insist it is not religious extremism that drives them to violence. Then, in total darkness, their leader Rigi addresses the camp. And seconds later, the group seems to set off towards some nearby lights in the desert.
Allahu Akbar.
Within moments, some men are shown face down, bound on the ground. These captives are seen again in daylight, crouching and blindfolded. The narrator says that the operation has been successfully carried out by Rigi and his group Jundullah, the Army of God. It is not clear from this video where.
سلاح‌های متعارفی که عموماً در جنگ‌های چریکی استفاده بیتین، سلاح‌هایی مثل کلاشینکوف، مثل M16، M16، مثل توپ 82. این سلاح‌ها عموماً ما استفاده کنه، هاگایس این سلاح استفاده کنه. رژیم هم البته اطلاع داریشه. موشک‌های سام 7 مثلا سام 9 این موشک در اختیار ما هستن، ولی موشک‌های مدرنی برای هواپیمای جتی در اختیار نداره. البته در تلاش هستیم.
In February this year, a large explosion near the Iranian city of Zahedan destroyed a bus and other passing vehicles. The bus had been carrying members of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, and 11 were killed, with 36 more injured. It was an audacious strike aimed at the very heart of Iran's armed forces and was condemned as a terrorist act by the UN Secretary General. Previous incidents blamed on Rigi by the authorities had more often resulted in civilian deaths. The Iranian government is the first time that Rigi has spoken publicly about his group's methods and techniques.
یه سلاح و یه مثلا ماشین و یه چیزان در ایران تا باز هستن و ما اکثر وقتی وسایلش ایران زنده تا تامین کنیم و اشتراک خود جمهوری اسلامی هم وقت ادعا کرده که ایشان سلاح و مهماتن از ایران تا گران تا از سربازان گران از پاسگان تا گران تا.
But there are questions about where Rigi is getting his funding and rumors that the CIA is funneling money to this terrorist group.
There are allegations that have been made public that the American government, the CIA, has been supporting Baluchi insurgents within Baluchistan, that this upsurge in violence are not coincidental, that they have to do with the fact that Iran and the US are essentially fighting this Cold War.
Karim Sadjapur is a scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and an expert on the Sunni minorities in Iran, such as the Baluch.
Well, the Iranian government claims it has very substantial evidence that outside forces like the United States are supporting Baluchi insurgents in Baluchistan, Kurdish insurgents in Kurdistan, Azari movements in Azerbaijan, and they claim to have very substantial evidence that the U.S.
These are the empty mountains and deserts of Baluchistan, stretching across Iran's borders to Afghanistan and Pakistan. This has been home base for the Baluch guerrilla leader Abdul Malik Rigi since he left school at 17. Protected by as many as 700 warriors, he now lives beyond the reach of the authorities with his wife and 3 young children. We spoke to a veteran field commander of a notorious Baluch resistance group. He requested that we hide his identity and disguise his voice. He says Rigi's forces are just one active front of a much larger army laying in wait.
Our reserve forces are still at home. There are more than 7,000 to 10,000 people, trained, well trained, but we cannot put them into the fire without having a guarantee from the United Nations or the big world powers who are governing the entire globe.
He says he's been fighting for over 50 years and used to operate out of Saddam's Iraq. At that time, the former dictator was fighting a long-term proxy war with his arch-enemy Iran, and the Baluch guerrillas were willing participants. But now the Baluch movement, having lost its former sponsor Saddam, is seeking new sources of funding. Revolutions, after all, do not come on the cheap.
There are Baluch businessmen in the Arab world. There are Baluch businessmen in Africa and Zanzibar and Kenya and other states. And there are Baluch who are living in Europe. They are contributing some kind of help to Regi, and it's a good thing. We appreciate what is happening and what is coming from them. It shows their sympathies to the movement which is being led now by Mr. Regi.
Raids like this are a tool of terror, but can also serve as a fundraiser.
Whenever he captures some officers, you see, he also take ransom from them in millions, and it is enough for them to pull on his, you see, movement for some time.
And because Baluchistan is at the center of smuggling routes for opium and arms out of Afghanistan and oil from Iran, Regi also raises money off the region's lawlessness.
Baluchistan is a free land for the smugglers, is a heaven for the smugglers. They have got a safe passage through his areas. So anyone who passes through his areas safely want to export his goods, they have to pay some toll taxes. So they are paying the toll tax to Mr. Regi.
But as for Regi, there is one alleged source of revenue that he vehemently denies.
من گوشتم که رابطه اطلاعاتی و خصوصی و یعنی چی مخفیانه گوهی جمع رابطه نداشته و پول بزرگی که من مشکل ساز بی یا کارا دیما بارت نهی چون ما زانه اگر آوان کمک بکرتین یعنی آوان بداتین اولا که ما نزوره نه.
Boladaev founded an exile political group called the Baluchistan People's Party, which he says is now secretly active inside Baluchistan, trying to destabilize the oppressive Iranian government.
We see achieving Baluch people's sovereignty is a job for us. We see it as working also outside Iran and inside Iran, and to see that the people in the world also understand what's happening in Baluchistan.
Though he says he does not support Regi's use of violence, Nasir believes militancy is a natural response.
Well, I think he's doing what he should do in this